Zarena found herself pacing back and forth along the edge of the clearing, the warmth of the fire reflecting off her skin. The stars above, so distant and indifferent, felt closer now, almost like they were watching her, like they knew her fate was about to change. It had only been a few days since the crash, yet in that time, everything had shifted. Her life was no longer defined by the mission, by the sterile walls of the ships she had once commanded. It was now defined by this strange, living world she saw. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, Kai turned to her. His expression, normally so open and free, now carried a hint of concern, something deeper than she had seen before. "You've been quiet tonight," he said, his voice soft as he sat beside her. The crackling of the fire filled the silence, but his words hung in the air, a question without a clear answer. Zarena shifted uncomfortably, her thoughts tangled in the whirlwind of emotions she had been trying to suppress. She didn't want to think about what the crash ate. "I'm just thinking," she replied, her voice more strained than she had intended. It was the truth, but only part of it. She was thinking, yes, but not about what had happened, not about the crash, the strange planet, or even the survival of her ship. She was thinking about him, Kai, the human boy who had shown her compassion in a way that no one ever had before. The boy who had reached out to her when she needed it most. He had given her hope, something she hadn't known she could hold on to. And she hadn't intended to get attached. She knew better than anyone that attachment was a dangerous thing. And yet, here she was, with the human boy who had shown her more kindness in these few days than any of her own people had in years. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to explain everything about the mission, about her world, about the life she had lost. But how could she? She couldn't even find the words to express how grateful she was. How could a boy like him ever understand the magnitude of what she saw? Kai, sensing the shift in her mood, reached over and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I know you're not saying everything, Zarena, but whatever it is, I'm here." His words were like a balm to the wound inside her, soothing the tension in her shoulders. He didn't need to know everything. Not yet. She didn't have to explain her world to him, to burden him with the weight of her loss. The truth was, she was starting to feel something for him, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. It was fear, yes, but it was more than that. It was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things didn't have to be this way. Maybe she didn't have to be alone. Zarena closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire settle around her. The weight of her situation felt lighter, for the first time since her crash. She had been trying to survive on her own, to keep her distance from Kai and the world he lived in. But now, in the silence of the forest, with the stars overhead and the boy beside her, she realized that she had been wrong. She didn't have to do it alone. Not anymore. The silence stretched between them, comfortable and quiet. Zarena let out a soft sigh. "Kai," she began, her voice barely more than a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." She paused, unsure of where to start, unsure of what to say. The truth felt like a weight in her chest, pressing down on her heart. She had no idea how to make him understand. "I'm not like you. I'm not from here. My world is far away." Kai didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, his eyes steady, patient. The firelight danced in his eyes, and for a moment, it felt like he could see beyond her alien form, beyond the crash, beyond the strange creature she had once thought herself to be. "I'm not just a girl," Zarena continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm an explorer, a member of an advanced civilization. I didn't mean to come here. My ship was damaged, and now I don't know how to get home." She bit her lip, her eyes downcast. "I didn't think I'd survive this. I thought I'd die alone." Kai's hand remained on her shoulder, but now it was more than just a gesture of comfort. It was an affirmation. He was there, and in that moment, it was enough. "You're not alone," he said softly, the words echoing in the stillness between them. "Not anymore. We'll figure this out together." Zarena looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of isolation. She didn't feel like the last of her kind, stranded on an alien planet. With Kai beside her, she felt something different, a flicker of something that might have been called hope, had she allowed herself to name it. The stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter that night, and the fire crackled a little warmer. In that quiet space between them, Zarena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't as indifferent as she had once thought. In the days that followed, their bond grew stronger. Zarina and Kai spent more time together, learning from one another, sharing stories of their respective worlds. Kai taught her about Earth's wonders, from the lush forests to the sprawling cities. Zarina, in turn, shared fragments of her own knowledge, her distant star systems, the cultures of her people, and the advanced technology she had once taken for granted. Their worlds were so different, and yet the connection they had felt so real. But with each passing day, Zarina knew the truth. She could not stay here forever. The planet, the people, Kai, they were not her own. They were a part of a world she could never truly belong to. She had to find a way back to her people. She had to find a way to return home. But as the days turned into weeks, and her connection with Kai deepened, Zarina began to wonder if she could ever leave. The feelings she had developed for him, feelings she had never anticipated, were not just simple gratitude. They were something deeper, something she couldn't ignore. And in that moment, Zarina realized that no matter how far she traveled, no matter how far the stars reached, she would never forget Kai. She would always remember the boy who had saved her, who had shown her kindness when she thought all was lost. And when the time came for her to leave, when she had to return to her own world, to her own people, she would leave with a promise. A promise that no matter how far apart they were, no matter the years that passed, she would return to him when the time was right. Her heart ached at the thought, but Zarina knew that it was a promise she would keep. The days passed, and with each passing hour, Zarina found herself growing more attached to Kai, though she didn't allow herself to fully acknowledge it. The connection between them was undeniable, yet she kept it buried beneath layers of practicality and self-control. She couldn't afford to get too close to him. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. Her mission, the survival of her people, the fate of her world, these were the things that mattered. But the longer she stayed, the more difficult it became to push those feelings aside. The warmth of Kai's companionship was a comfort, something she hadn't realized she desperately needed. The touch of his hand when he helped her, the sound of his laughter when they shared a joke, and the quiet moments spent gazing at the stars, each small interaction wove itself into the fabric of her being, making it harder and harder to imagine life without him. One evening, as they sat by the fire once again, Zarina found herself looking at Kai with a heaviness in her heart. He had been so kind, so patient with her, and she couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the time came for her to leave. Would he even remember her? Would he understand why she had to go? Or would he see her as just another fleeting memory of something that had once been, but was now lost? She couldn't answer that question, but she knew one thing. She had to find a way back to her people. She couldn't stay here forever, no matter how much she wished otherwise. Her people needed her, and the longer she remained on Earth, the more she risked losing everything. Zarina. Kai's voice broke through her thoughts, gentle and concerned. You've been quiet again. What's on your mind? Zarina blinked, momentarily stunned by the question. She had grown so accustomed to burying her feelings, to keeping her thoughts to herself, that she hadn't even realized how much of a distance had grown between her and him. She looked at him, trying to find the right words. But the truth was, she didn't know how to explain what she was feeling. How could she? How could she explain the complexity of her emotions without revealing too much? She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable before. And yet, here, in the quiet of the forest, with Kai's eyes watching her, she felt an overwhelming urge to tell him everything. She started, her voice shaky. I don't belong here, Kai. My world is far away, and I'm not like you. I came here by accident, and now I don't know how to get back. Kai's gaze softened, his expression filled with understanding. I can't imagine how hard that must be for you, he said quietly, his hand moving to rest gently on hers. But you don't have to do it alone. I'll help you. We'll figure this out together. Zarina's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly pushed the feeling down. She couldn't afford to let herself get carried away by the warmth of his kindness. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to keep her here. I appreciate your help, Kai, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But there's more at stake here than just me. My people. I need to get back to them. They need me. Kai didn't reply immediately. Instead, he simply sat there beside her, his presence a steady reassurance. He didn't press her for more information, didn't ask her to explain anything further. He just let the silence stretch between them, comfortable and unhurried. I understand, he finally said, his voice calm. But that doesn't mean you have to face it all alone. Whatever happens, I'll be here. Zarena couldn't find the words to express how much his promise meant to her. She simply nodded, the weight of her emotions too much to bear in that moment. As the fire crackled between them, Zarena's mind wandered to what the future might hold. She had always been a loner, a traveler, a warrior, and a scientist. She had been trained to survive, to conquer any challenge thrown her way. But here, on this strange planet, surrounded by a world of humans who were so different from her, she felt something she had never expected to feel: uncertainty. She didn't know how much longer she could hide her true feelings. She didn't know how much longer she could pretend that she didn't care. As much as she tried to convince herself that she was only here for the mission, to save her people, she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She had found something on Earth that she hadn't known. She was looking for a connection, a bond, a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in years. Chapter 2. The Promise of Tomorrow. The next few days passed in a blur. Zarena continued to stay with Kai and his friends, learning more about Earth's ways and adapting to the challenges of survival. The human world was so vastly different from her own, yet in many ways, it was also the same. The struggles they faced, the relationships they built, these were things that transcended the vast expanse of space. And with each passing day, Zarena grew more and more connected to this world and to the boy who had shown her kindness when she thought all was lost. But despite the bond that was growing between them, Zarena couldn't escape the nagging feeling that she didn't belong. Earth was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't her home. The stars that she had once admired from her own world now felt distant, unreachable. Her people needed her, and she couldn't ignore that call. The universe, with all its infinite possibilities, was waiting for her to return, to pick up the pieces of a broken mission. She had to leave, and yet, part of her didn't want to. Kai must have sensed the change in her mood because, one evening as they sat together near the edge of the forest, he asked her what was on her mind. Zarena hesitated for a moment before speaking, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her chest. "I need to go back," she said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I can't stay here forever, Kai. My people, they need me. I have to find a way to get back to them." Kai didn't speak right away. Instead, he simply reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek in a gesture of tenderness. "I know," he said, his voice steady. "But that doesn't mean you have to leave tonight, or tomorrow, or the next day. You don't have to rush." Zarena looked at him, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she would soon have to say goodbye. "But I can't stay here. I can't leave them behind. I dash." "You don't have to explain," Kai interrupted gently. "I understand. Just know that, whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready to go. Whenever that is." Zarena's eyes filled with unshed tears, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving him behind, but she knew that it was the right thing to do. Her duty to her people came first. But Kai's words offered her something she had never had before: a promise. A promise that, no matter how far apart they might be, their bond would endure. And with that, Zarena knew she had made the right choice. She would return to her people. But not today, not tomorrow. For now, she would stay. Days turned into weeks, and Zarena found herself at a crossroads she had never anticipated. Each morning, she woke to the warmth of the sun filtering through the trees, the laughter of Kai and his friends in the distance as they went about their daily routines. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, and yet, every day, Zarena could feel the pull of her own world, calling her back to the stars. The promise she had made to herself, to her people, lingered at the back of her mind, reminding her that she couldn't remain in this strange world forever. Kai, too, seemed to sense the growing tension within her. He never asked her to stay longer than she was ready to, but he made no secret of his desire for her to be a part of his life. He'd grown attached to her in a way that was both sweet and bittersweet, as if he understood the impermanence of their time together. They spoke about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their lives, their worlds, their hopes, and their dreams. But the unspoken truth between them was always there: Zarena couldn't stay. And yet, with each passing day, she couldn't ignore the way she was beginning to feel about him. Kai had become more than just a companion. He had become someone she cared for deeply, someone who made her heart race with a look, who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. She had always prided herself on her strength, her independence. But here, with him, she felt vulnerable, exposed. She had never been in a relationship like this one, where emotions were so raw, so real. And it scared her. One evening, as they sat together beneath the stars, the fire between them crackling softly, Zarena looked at Kai, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she knew she had to make. She could feel the uncertainty in her chest, the conflict that had been building within her for days. "I can't stay forever," Zarena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what you're thinking, and I don't want to hurt you, but I can't ignore the reality of my situation." Kai didn't immediately respond. He simply nodded, as though he had expected this conversation to come eventually. "I know," he said softly, "and I don't want to hold you back. I wish things were different." Zarena's heart ached as she looked at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. She wished things were different, too. She wished she could stay. She wished she could have a future here, with him. But she couldn't. The universe called her back to her mission, to her people, to the stars that had once been her home. "Can I ask you something?" Kai asked, his voice steady but filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "When you leave, will you come back?" Zarena hesitated, the question hitting her like a tidal wave. She had never thought about it that way, about returning, about coming back to Earth, to him. She had been so focused on leaving, on fulfilling her mission, that she hadn't allowed herself to consider the possibility of returning. But now, with Kai's eyes on her, full of hope and longing, she realized that she had to give him an answer. "I don't know," Zarena replied honestly, her voice low and uncertain. "I don't know when I'll be able to return, but I can promise you this. I'll never forget you, Kai. You've shown me more kindness than I ever thought possible. And maybe, one day, our paths will cross again. But for now, I have to go back." Kai nodded again, the corner of his lips tugging into a bittersweet smile. "I understand," he said, though the sadness in his eyes was undeniable. "But promise me one thing." Zarena looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "Promise me that you won't forget what we had," Kai said, his voice thick with emotion. "Promise me that you'll remember that we were together, that we shared something special. No matter where you go or what happens next, remember me." Zarena felt her chest tighten, the rawness of his words hitting her harder than she expected. She had never been one for promises, especially ones she couldn't keep. But something about Kai, something about this moment, made her feel like she had to make this promise. "I promise," she said softly, her voice breaking the quiet of the night. "I'll remember you, Kai. Always." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and unshared fears. Zarena didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Her time on Earth, her time with Kai, had changed her. And no matter where she went or how far the stars stretched, she would carry the memory of this world with her. Chapter 3, The Decision. The day finally came. The moment Zarena had been dreading and yet had known was inevitable. The day she had to leave Earth, to return to her mission, to her people. She stood at the edge of the forest, looking out at the world she had grown to love, the world that had given her so much more than she had ever expected. The sun was rising, casting golden rays across the landscape, but Zarena felt no warmth from the light. Her ship, once a pile of rubble, had been partially repaired. She had found a few useful tools and salvaged what she could, but it wasn't enough to return home. The journey would be long, and the risks were great. But she had no other choice. Her people needed her. The stars called her home. As she walked through the forest one last time, Zarena thought back to the memories she had made with Kai. His laughter, his smile, the way he had always been there for her when she needed someone to lean on. They had shared so much in such a short time. She had never expected to feel this way about a human, about someone so different from herself. But now, as she stood at the edge of the world she had come to care for, she realized just how much she had changed, how much she had allowed herself to care. She could hear Kai approaching before she saw him. His footsteps were familiar, comforting, and when he stepped into view, his face was etched with both sadness and resolve. He had come to say goodbye, and she could see that he wasn't ready to let her go. "I didn't think you'd leave this quickly," he said, his voice quiet, but filled with emotion. Zarena looked at him, her heart heavy in her chest. "I didn't want to go, Kai. I wanted to stay. But my people, they need me." "I know," Kai said softly, "but it doesn't make it any easier." Zarena stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to memorize every detail. "You'll be okay, Kai? You're stronger than you think." "I don't know about that," he replied with a small smile. "But I'll try to be." For a long moment, they stood there, not speaking, just holding each other in the quiet of the morning. The wind rustled through the trees, and the birds began to sing, but in that moment, it was just the two of them, sharing one last moment together. Zarina pulled back slightly, her hands resting on his shoulders. "I promise I'll never forget you," she said softly. "No matter where I go, I'll always carry you with me. I'll wait for you," Kai said, his voice thick with emotion. "Whenever you're ready to come back, I'll be here." Zarina felt the weight of his words, and in that moment, she knew that leaving wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She leaned in, kissing him softly, a farewell that spoke more than words ever could. And with that, she turned and walked toward the ship, ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to return to the stars. The engines of Zarina's ship hummed to life with a low, steady rumble, its once scorched hull now patched together with makeshift materials she had scavenged during her time on Earth. The last of the repairs had been completed just hours before, and Zarina knew that the time had come. The ship was barely functional, but it was all she had, and it would be enough to take her home. As the ship began to lift off the ground, a part of Zarina felt an immense weight in her chest. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, it felt almost unreal. The Earth she had grown so attached to, with all its wonders and its strange beauty, was slipping away beneath her feet. And the boy, Kai, the human who had shared her pain and her hopes, was fading into the distance. The ship shuddered as it broke free of the planet's atmosphere, the stars stretching out before her like an endless sea. The pain of leaving Kai behind was almost unbearable, and as the planet grew smaller in the viewport, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever see him again. Would their paths cross once more? Would he remember her the way she would remember him? Zarina shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She couldn't afford to dwell on what she was leaving behind. She had a mission, and it was a mission she couldn't fail. Her people were counting on her. But even with that knowledge, she couldn't help but feel the gnawing ache in her heart. As she piloted the ship into the dark expanse of space, the silence around her seemed almost suffocating. The hum of the engines was the only sound in the cockpit, and Zarina found herself lost in her thoughts. She had always been alone, traveling from one planet to the next, but never had she felt the weight of isolation like this before. She had been part of something greater, part of a mission that gave her life purpose. But now, with no destination but the stars, she was left to wonder if the path she had chosen had been the right one. Her hand hovered over the controls, and for a brief moment, she considered turning the ship around. But she knew that wasn't possible. She had made her decision, and there was no going back. She could only move forward. The stars were now her only company. Chapter 4, The Return. Time passed in a blur. Zarina journeyed through the vastness of space, her ship carrying her farther from Earth with each passing day. The loneliness began to settle in, becoming a constant companion, but Zarina's resolve only strengthened. Her mission was far from over, and the fate of her people depended on her success. The universe was vast, and yet, as she drifted further from Earth, she couldn't escape the memory of Kai, the boy who had shown her kindness when she had felt so lost, the boy who had believed in her when no one else did. She couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again, that the connection they had shared wasn't just a fleeting moment in time. Weeks turned into months, and eventually, Zarina reached the coordinates that would lead her to her people, her home. But as the familiar sights of her world began to come into view, Zarina found herself torn. She had come so far, and yet, something deep within her whispered that she wasn't ready. There was still something waiting for her, something she couldn't ignore. And then, as if the universe itself had heard her silent plea, a signal came through. It was faint, crackling with static, but unmistakable. It was Earth. Zarina's heart skipped a beat as she adjusted the ship's communications array. She had almost forgotten about the message she had sent Kai before she left before she made her final departure. The message was simple, just a few words, but they carried so much weight. I'll always remember you. But this message, this new signal, was something more. It was a signal from Kai, from Earth. The voice that crackled through the ship's speaker was unmistakable. Zarina? Are you there? Kai's voice was strained, but filled with urgency. I don't know how, but we found a way to reach you. I need to tell you something. Zarina's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls, bringing the signal into clearer focus. Kai's words were garbled, but she could hear the desperation in his voice. She had never expected to hear from him again. But here he was, reaching out from across the galaxy. I don't know how long this message will last, but I've been working on something. A way to bring you back. I won't stop until I do. The signal faded, the message cutting off abruptly. Zarina's heart raced as the message died out, the silence that followed deafening. She couldn't believe it. Kai had been working on a way to reach her, to bring her back. She had thought she was alone, that her mission was hers alone to carry, but this message proved her wrong. He hadn't forgotten her. He had been trying to reach her, just as she had tried to reach him. With the message still echoing in her mind, Zarina set a course back toward Earth. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wasn't alone anymore. The stars that had once felt so distant, so isolating, now seemed to shimmer with promise. The universe, vast and infinite, was filled with possibilities. And in the distance, a human boy was waiting for her. A boy who had changed everything. And so, with a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in months, Zarina made her way back to the planet that had started it all. Back to Kai. Back to the world that had given her the one thing she never thought she'd find: connection.